Let's start off with Susan. She called in first, so we'll take her first. Susan in Pittsburgh, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Patrick. I have a question. I was listening to Father Kabicki. He was talking about prayer, and I'm not very good at, bearing my soul. I have a hard time doing my examination of conscience. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, I like to say prayers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, prayers that we know.
So if I could speak to what exactly? Flesh it out for me.
That's easier for me. And I wondered if you could speak to the difference between saying prayers and praying.
That's an interesting way to put it. Well, so when you talk about saying prayers, do you mean like rote prayers that we know from memory, like the Our Father and the Hail Mary prayers
like the Rosary or various devotions or
Okay.
That's so much easier for me.
Sure.
But sometimes I feel like I'm not relating to God.
Right. I can understand that. So let's take a look, first of all, at what is prayer, and that will help answer the question. Prayer, fundamentally, is you addressing your thoughts to God. In whatever manner you do that, that's prayer. And there are different kinds of prayer. Some prayer is more, you might say, more common with those who are deeper in the Christian life, more mature perhaps in the Christian life. Doesn't mean that someone is immature like personality-wise, but in terms of maturity in the Christian life, you can notice differences in prayer, and I'll explain what those are in a moment. So prayer fundamentally is when you open your heart and your mind and you speak to God. And whatever words you use, you don't even necessarily have to use words. You can just simply emote your feelings, your thoughts, your ideas to God. They may not even take a thematic form. You may not put them in your thoughts in sentences, but it just may be anguish. Think of the person who's grieving the loss of a husband or a wife, and there are no words, and yet that person is praying. When she addresses herself to God and is pouring out her heart in whatever way she can, that's prayer. So remember that, first of all, is that prayer has different forms, but that's what it means fundamentally. So the great masters of the spiritual life, they say that prayer generally follows three steps or three categories, and one leads to the other. Some people never move out of the first area, and that's okay. If you think of it as the shallow end of the swimming pool, you're still in the swimming pool. You're still getting wet. You're still splashing around. But for those who move to the deeper end of the swimming pool, there's more that they can do. They can dive deeper, etc. So that first area, or the first step, or the first phase, maybe you could call it, would be what's called discursive prayer. And this is where rote prayers come in. And as you notice, the church gives us these prayers. They're time-honored, in some cases nearly 2,000 years old. In the case of the Our Father, 2,000 years old, coming from Jesus himself. So when the apostle said, Lord, teach us to pray, he said, when you pray, pray like this. And he taught them a discursive prayer. He taught them a rote prayer, the Our Father. So that has pride of place, you might say. It's also the easiest form of prayer because once you commit it to memory, it's like knowing your times tables or adding and subtracting. You can just instantly slip into that form of prayer, and you're praying. You are praying. The second category, after you go beyond the rote prayers, and one more thing about the rote prayers, those prayers, and when I say rote, what I mean is that we memorize them. It doesn't mean that we say them in a rote manner or we say them mindlessly. People can say them mindlessly. They can just clickety-clack go through their prayers and never really think much about what they're saying. That does happen. That's true. But when I say rote prayer, I'm not referring to that. I'm just referring to that we commit it to memory, and then we recite that same prayer like the Our Father. So then the second area, or the deeper waters in prayer, would be the prayers of meditation. Now, meditation is something that you can learn to do, and many people learn to do this, especially if they're, say, going into religious life. They learn how to meditate upon some truth of God. It could be seen in the gospel. It could be some teaching or some statement in Scripture, whatever it may be. And so meditation it's an active form of prayer that goes beyond rote prayer insofar as you're exercising your intellectual powers to focus on this teaching. And as you're praying, you're thinking about it. It's almost like you're holding up some beautiful crystal up to the sun, and you're examining it from different directions and seeing how the light shines through it from different directions. That's an analogy. It's not an exact analogy, but that's a way of thinking about meditation, where it's an active, more penetrating, more focused form of prayer, and it's deeper. Then the third and the deepest area of the pool is what's known as contemplation. Now, contemplation often is not something that the average Christian gets to. And it's not always clear when you get to it. But the great saints who have gotten to that point, like St. Teresa of Avila, who wrote a lengthy treatise on this issue, her beautiful book called The Interior Castle, describes this process. And when you get to that phase, that is a different form of prayer altogether, because you're not saying words, you're not actively using your imagination or your intellect to focus on something and consider it from different perspectives. Rather, the best way I can describe it is you're gazing at God. St. John Vianney, the curé of Ars, famous for his prayer life, he was once asked by one of his parishioners, when you pray, what do you do? What do you say? And he said, I look at the Lord and the Lord looks at me. And that's a very succinct way of explaining that type of deep prayer, where you're no longer actively, trying to pray in the senses that I described before, but rather you're just sort of basking in God's presence. You're focused on God, you're looking at God, you're thinking about God, but it's now it's like looking at a beautiful sunset. You're not doing anything other than just soaking it in. You're absorbing it. And I'm probably not even really doing justice by way of describing this, but if you read St. Teresa of Avila's book, The Interior Castle, she does a much better job. She's a doctor of the church, of course, I'm not. But she does a much better job of elaborating on what that is. So let's come back to you now, Susan. So let's just say you're in that shallow end of the pool. That's okay. And I dare say most Christians probably stay there their entire lives. And that's not a bad thing. So as you're praying, if you're most comfortable using those prayers that you've memorized, the prayers of the church, they're beautiful, they're rich in theology, they're precise, they're very helpful. Keep doing that. And maybe in your prayers, one of your prayer intentions could be, Lord, if you wish me to go deeper into prayer, help me do so. Please draw me and open my mind so I can learn how to do this. I would read that book by St. Teresa of Avila. That will help you. The book I recommended on the show yesterday, An Introduction to the Devout Life, St. Francis de Sales talks a bit about that as well in his helpful advice to people who want to go deeper. But don't feel as though you're doing anything improper or that you're not doing something pleasing to the Lord. The fact that you're praying at all is a good thing. And if you're asking him to give you more, what did Jesus say? He said, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open to you. So if in your temperament and your, how you are as a person, if that appeals to you and you desire to experience more of it, ask the Lord for it. And I do believe he will grant it to you. So those are some thoughts. What do you think?
Thank you. That was very helpful.
I'm glad. I think you'll find this an adventure. And some people only come to that adventure later in life. Some people when they're young, but most people never even start that adventure. So if it appeals to you, if the door is there, you can walk through it. And little by little, you might find yourself going into those deeper waters.
And thank you very much, Patrick.
You're welcome. Thank you. The main thing is, everybody, pray. That's the key. Pray. Just pray. What does the Bible say? Pray always. So you don't have to be kneeling down with your eyes closed and your hands folded to be praying. You can be driving the kids to school. You can be grocery shopping. You could be praying in the frozen food aisle at your local grocery store. You can be praying at any time of the day or night. When you wake up in the morning, what I recommend is, very first thing when you get up in the morning, make the sign of the cross and say your morning offering. It's what I do. Not that what I do matters one way or the other. I'm just a guy. But I've learned a few things from the real smart people, the really holy people. I try to pay attention to them. So, little tip, when you get up in the morning, as soon as you bound out of bed, make the sign of the cross, address yourself to the Lord. You're in his presence. He sees you. You see him. Lord, I love you. Brand new day. Thank you for keeping me on planet Earth for another day. Who knows what you've got in store for me today, Lord? Maybe say some of your morning prayers, perhaps an Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, or maybe pray a decade of the Rosary. You can do that as you're getting dressed. You can do that as you're brushing your teeth. You can do that as you're walking down the stairs to go fire up the coffee machine. You can begin your day with prayer, and I'm here to tell you, if you begin your day with prayer habitually, your day will be so much better because you're going to get off on the right foot. You're in the presence of God. It makes it easier for you to pray throughout the rest of the day because you've set the tone. Of course, the great saints will tell you also, not only pray in the first thing in the morning, but before you go to bed at night, say your prayers, maybe an examination of conscience, act of contrition. Oh my God, I am heartily sorry for having offended thee, that prayer. Ask your guardian angel to watch over you. Ask our Blessed Mother to pray for you. So these are all, you might think of them as sort of monuments of prayer that they're like mile markers in your day. And when you've reached the end of your day and all of your work is done and it's time to rest, close your eyes, you know that it's a day that's been spent, at least to some extent, in prayer. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. That's one of those beautiful things about this, is that it's not like trying to climb up a cliff. It's like exercising muscles. The more you exercise them, the stronger they get, and the more weight you can carry.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.